into the form. Moving on to, now I would request delegates to deliver their introductory remarks, starting with Robert.
It's wonderful to be here at the festival and to be here in Goa and also to be part of the delegation of Australian filmmakers. There's 50 Australian filmmaker and producers here as the country in focus, and with a long tradition of our close association between our two countries. It's wonderful that there are so many Australian films playing. Force of Nature is a film set in the Australian bush. I grew up in the Australian bush, and in lots of ways it is a love letter to that world. It is made with my very close friend and business partner Eric Banner, who plays the lead. He's one of Australia's most well-known actors. And I think it does something that cinema does so well. It is about landscape and a world that is very different to here. And I think for a lot of Australians, we learn about India through Indian cinema, and for people here, they learn about Australia through Australian cinemas. Depiction of landscape. And I loved playing the film yesterday to a wonderful packed audience. And as a filmmaker, I can feel the profound love that people have here for cinema and for filmmakers. So it's very, very exciting to be here.
Thank you, Robert.
Well, hi, everybody. I'd like to second what Robert said in that it's just such an absolute thrill to be here. It's my first time in India, my first time in Goa, and it's always been something I dreamed about doing. And so to be able to come here and then also to be able to come with this film and to be able to share it with Indian audiences is a fantastic experience. I don't really know yet how the film will be received. So I hope people like it and respond to it. I'm really interested to hear from everybody when they see the film about what their reactions were. And similarly, it showcases a beautiful landscape in Australia, and one that's quite different from maybe landscapes that you might have seen in Mad Max or other films about Australia. And it's in my home state of New South Wales. So I think that's a lovely part of the film. And I co-directed the film with my good friend Will Howarth, who also produced the film. And we wrote the film with Talia Zucker, who is the lead in the film. So Talia was co-writer and also the lead, and then Will produced the film, co-wrote it and co-directed it with me. So I guess that indicates as well that it was a really close, tight team. It wasn't a massive budget film, but we tried to do as much as we could with the limited resources that we had. And also, you might recognise, I'm not sure how big the TV show Succession is in India, or whether it's been something that people have responded to over here. It's quite a big show in America and Australia, and the other lead actor in the film is from Succession. He's actually an Australian actor, so you may recognise him. Yeah, I think that's about it for me. But once again, thank you so much, everybody, and I'm really looking forward to meeting as many people as possible and learning more about Indian cinema and learning about what collaborations are possible between Australia and India moving forward. So, yeah, thank you.
So before moving to opening the floor for the questions, I have small questions for both of you. As you both mentioned that Australian landscape is a distinctive element which separates it from the Western cinema and other regional cinema. So when it becomes a compulsion to show the Australian landscape to portray that it is an Australian movie?
Yeah, it's a great. That's a great question. I think that as a director, I always feel like the landscape is a character in the film, and the way it affects people, the way they live their lives in it, the way it casts a spell over them. In my film Force of Nature, it's about these characters getting lost in the bush, and the Australian bush is a very tough and often brutal place to get lost in, but also incredibly beautiful. So for me, I think the concept of landscape as a character in the film is really critical.
Yeah, and I'd say as well, Australia is obviously a huge country with a very small population, and we've always had a very distinct relationship with that vastness and that sense of isolation and the kind of the fear that sense of isolation can invoke in people. And throughout the history of Australian cinema, that's been a big element. I think it plays in both of our films, that sense that the natural world can be terrifying and isolating, and I guess, as you said, Robert, both a source of beauty and of terror. um, so, yeah, I think that's why it plays an important part in our films.
Yeah, and just one thing to add to that too, Australia has a very complex relationship with the First Nations people, the traditional owners of the land we filmed on, the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation, and their history in that landscape is so significant. And I think that one of the exciting things in Australian cinema is that we're also seeing a lot of First Nations filmmakers making films about the landscapes that we made our films about.
Yeah, totally agree, sir. And this is one of the distinctive element, as we all can see, beautiful landscapes. We can just close the eye and admire the beauty of it. One last question to Tom, then we'll move to audience. One distinctive element in your movie is background score. It is so beautiful and at the same time it is haunting. So how did you choose that particular sound score or that theme particularly?
This is the score. So you're talking about, yeah.
Yeah.
Actually, the score was written by a composer called Helena Chaika, who's my wife. So she's going to be doubly. She was very disappointed that she couldn't come to go up. We have a 6-month-old baby, so she's looking after the baby. But yeah, she did a fantastic job. And one thing that really struck, I haven't worked in this genre space very much. My previous films were more kind of realist kind of films, and I was really struck by working in a thriller, sci-fi, horror-ish kind of space that you can really take some risks with the music. You can experiment with things that are more discordant and use sound design elements in the score. So I think even though it can be more conventional, perceived as a more conventional approach working in genre, it allows great scope for experimentation in the music. And we just said to Helena, go for it, see what in the landscape inspires you, also in the kind of futuristic technology inspires you. And I think she'll be better at answering the question because it was really just her vision for it. And I think she did a great job of capturing mood and unease and something otherworldly and strange.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
I'm definitely going to pass that on to her though, so she'll be very happy. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. Now the floor is open and we would request everyone to restrict to one questions only because of the paucity of time. Thank you.
Hi, congratulations on your films. It's a privilege to have you with us today. So since both of you talked about landscapes, difference in landscapes, and Tom mentioned the idea of vastness. And I think India as a country also shares that sense of vastness in very different and varied landscapes and geographical terrain. And we're talking about, the force of nature. And this becomes even more relevant at a time where we are seeing an increasing number of ecological disasters and the threat of climate change looms larger each day. Do you think having films that showcase such landscapes and the potential threats to such landscapes, especially at, the brink of disaster at which we stand today, is becoming increasingly more important through cinema? And what role can be, or what different ways can we target this topic in so that it resonates better or creates greater awareness among the people?
Yeah, that's an absolutely fantastic question. It's a massive issue that Australia faces, as does the world. The environmental degradation of our landscape and the impacts of climate change. And the Force of Nature is a sequel to a film called The Dry, which was very much about what you talked about. I made another film, Blueback, which is about marine conservation. I would say that there probably is no more important story for filmmakers to be talking about than the environment and the impacts of climate change. It is something we all share in both of our countries. However, it is hard to do because you get profoundly criticised for it. As we know, there are a lot of climate deniers. a lot of media. I have received, vitriolic attacks on my work and when they are about the environment. So I think it is important that younger emerging filmmakers, and there's an interesting eco theme in this film as well, in Vitro. So I actually love that question because I think it speaks right to the heart of something both of our films actually talk to.
Yeah, and I think one of the way I've kind of thought about it is to try not to be too direct or maybe preachy with the message around climate change while still trying to get it in there, because as Robert said, people can respond negatively if they go to see a movie and then feel like they're being told something moral. But I think one of the great things about film is that it can tell a story and engage people and talk about issues through characters in a way that can sometimes get past those defenses. So yeah, I agree with Robert. It's both a big challenge, but also something very important to try and do as much as possible. And it's kind of in the background of our film as well. Yeah.
To in vitro in particular, so what question has been raised in the audience, the divide between science and morality and ethics, where one ends and where another one takes over. So in particular, in vitro, we have seen that biotechnology, at one hand, it is helping humanity, and on the other hand, it is also threatening. So, what is your conclusion? Would you be continuing with this theme to send a message? Because it is this generally, filmmakers don't try to send a message to the audience, they allow them to form their own opinion, but this movie is with a message. So, what is your take?
Yeah. I guess my feeling is I am concerned, I guess, about unregulated technology and biotechnology in lots of areas, but I can't really see effective regulation stopping it or preventing it. And I don't feel like there's a great conversation about how new technologies should be managed, even in other areas as well, such as AI. So I certainly don't have any solutions or anything like that, but hopefully the film is an opportunity for people to reflect on where we're going with new technology and just maybe be an opportunity for people to reflect on these things and a bit of a warning. But I think it is something worth focusing on, and hopefully it gives the audience a chance to pause and think about these questions. But in fact, that's as much as we can really do with filmmaking. Then it's over to policymakers and politicians and other people to try and solve these problems.
Basically, it is a way to start the discussion, what he meant to say. And for that end, the movie succeeds. Now, we'll take the discussion to another area since Australia is... please continue.
Hi Robert, hi Tom. First of all, welcome to IFFI, welcome to India. So I have a very quick question. It is something related to business. That as far as I remember, please correct me if I'm wrong, that in 2020, The Dry was the topmost, I think 14th topmost gross making film of Australian cinemas, right? How do you look at this Dry too?
So that's a good question. So The Dry came out after COVID, after the pandemic, and it was released in Australia at a time when Hollywood films were not being released at all. And it was a very courageous decision of our distributor to release it, and Australians flocked to see it. Force of Nature has done about half as well. It's still a very successful film because The Dry was so big. Force of Nature is still very successful. But I must say, coming to India and learning more about Indian cinema, one of the great triumphs is how people here love their local films that are about their own stories and their own culture, and they're entertained in various different ways by them. And it's interesting, and you should all know that in Australia, Indian cinema is as popular as independent Australian cinema. And in the Australian box office at the moment, in the top 10 films, and that includes all the big Hollywood films, there is an Indian film. So So your national cinema is watched by Australians in huge numbers, and obviously people from here that live now in Australia, which I think is wonderful.
We have so many questions, but due to paucity of time, we cannot take more questions. Sorry for that. And we before coming to end of this discussion, we would like to have some comments about the another shared interest between India and Australia, that is cricket. So right now, Test match is being played in Perth, and our guests are very happy. They would like to share their opinions.
It's so wonderful that we're here with a big Australian delegation that has come here to say we want to make more films with India. We want to make co-productions. We want to make films here that are shared in our stories, and that the biggest delegation of Australian filmmakers ever is here in India. And the government has supported this. And the first test between Australia and India in Perth started today, and I think Australia's doing quite well.
Yeah.
But I love the common ground that we share, and I know there has been history that has been more complex between our countries, but I must say, as someone who lives in Australia, who has a young family in Australia, and you know, the connection between our two countries is like this. It is so close. And that I think this film festival is a chance for us to really build the foundation for some very exciting films.
So with this, we are coming to the close, and I thank Robert and Tom for their participation. We hope that the discussions and insights shared today will take the message of the film to a wider audience through the media. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Robert, there is a small token of love from our side.
The photo, yeah. Thank you, son.
Tom, please.
Oh, wow. That's fantastic. Look at that. Actually, we should get that photo.